Okay.
Loved it.
And the food was real good too.
Okay, so the overall impact of the students, and I heard they were very organized. And
I think the impact was the fact it opened up what we call the transparency for Atlanta, and where we had very few options. For example, on our side, we, as I said, on the white side, you had both the Journal, which was the evening paper, and you had the Constitution, which was the morning paper. They had different editorials, and of course, as you know, the name Ralph McGill, he was one of the, I guess, one of the most, with liberal editors. And it was Ralph McGill with the Constitution who helped with the integration as far as Atlanta and the Atlanta University Center. I remember when the civil rights movement was going on, and we had what was called the Atlanta University Summer School, which was made up of all of the colleges in the center. And they would have programs, and they would bring to the city outstanding persons of any ethnic group where they couldn't go before, but they could all come to Atlanta University. And I remember that Ralph McGill assigned a special editor to the university system. And that is how we were able to get articles in the Constitution, because before that, we didn't have the freedom to have some of the people who came to speak because of the editors. But with Ralph McGill, he would send someone. Bruce Galpin was the person he sent. And Bruce would come to all of these summer school lectures, regardless of who came. And we could see the articles in the Constitution, which before that time we didn't. Now, unfortunately, we don't have two newspapers now. We only have one. And even though they say, they have different viewpoints, it wasn't the same as when you had the two newspapers. So in some places we lost, and in some places we gained. Now, on our side, where we only had one paper, we now have the Inquirer and the Voice and several other papers that may not be as renowned, but we have a number of sources that we can get different ideology and how people think.
The process to write the appeal for human rights, did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, one thing about it, Carl Holman, he was my counterpart at Clark, and he was the one who, he's an English he taught English, and he was the one that helped them to design the manifesto. And as you know, it was, they took out a whole ad in both the Constitution and the Inquirer, so that the manifesto and what the students felt were their rights was able to be shared with a greater audience than it would have been if we had not had Carl to write it, along with some other people at Spelman and the students.
Did you want to talk about SNCC?
I didn't know about SNCC too much. I would really like to talk about how important education has been to me, and because of Michael's grandfather and all of us who worked in the field of education. When I was able to go to Booker T. Washington High School, which was the first public high, we had an excellent principal. Do you imagine back in 1937, our curriculum required 2 foreign languages, and do you know what our first foreign language was? Latin. My second language was French. So we had to take 4 years and when we look at the watered down curriculum now, and the students don't have to take those. The other thing was that I went on and finished Booker T. Washington. We only had one new book the years I was in that was up from slavery. All of our other books were handed down from the white schools, and they were stamped. And our mothers would tell us, well, it doesn't matter, just put a brown covering over and learn all you can out of that book and you will succeed. And that's what we did. We went on to Atlanta University. After I finished Atlanta University and entered as a teacher at Clark, and one of the ways you move up or ascend the ladder institutions of higher learning, you have to have a doctorate. When I finished AU several years later and I wanted to move up, I could not enter any of the flagship universities at that time because they were all, most of the southern institutions were close to us. But the one thing that the civil rights did, they said if you cannot accommodate them at your flagship universities, you have to pay for them to go to a university of, of your choice. And that is how people ask me, how did you get way out to the University of Colorado? Because I couldn't go to Georgia State. And I just thought the program out there, I read about it being a real good program. I'd never gone west. But when it came time for me to go, Miss Harris, who was the Regent's secretary, she said, you can't go. And I said, why? She said, when we opened this up to, quote, your people, they decided to go to the University of Mexico, the University of California. They have used up all of the travel budget. Now, that was not my fault. And I'm not really a person to be pushed back. So I said, Miss Harris, that was her name. I said, you let me go home and talk this over with my family. It was always supportive. So we decided. They say, well, okay. Say, well, they paid the tuition. Say, yes. And they said, well, she said, you have to go. I think you can't go west of the Mississippi. And I said, okay. When I discussed it with the family, I said, well, you all pay my tuition and give me as much money for my transportation that will take me east of and I'll pay the rest of it. And, not thinking about my geography, I took it to New York. And so I said, Purdy, go to New England, you get about $10 more. But anyway, the idea is, and then when I got out there and I came back and they said, and I would tell them about the beautiful prairie and the rest and red rocks and the scenery and how it was so nice out there. They said, well, you're getting a better education than we were. But halfway through it, then I guess they saw how expensive it was. Then they opened up the flagship universities, but I had gotten my doctoral